Hello. Today we have a. Is it a great day? I don't know. You will decide afterwards. We are with Polo, and his friends call him as politics. Politics. That was a joke, but he will tell you. So we will discuss why all these things in US happening, and like we were about to chat about gaming, mobile games, production. Then like the hot topic is like super hot. We cannot miss that. He has he's already in US, has a game studio. He studied political science, which is maybe his favorite, or I don't know. So welcome, Polo.
Oh, hello. I also have a cat who will walk across the screen a few times. Yeah, good to meet you. And yeah, funny, we were just talking a little bit about the political climate and some crazy stuff going on this week. And I mentioned to Omer that I actually have a degree in political science. So yeah, so I tend to have a little bit of education on the topic. But yeah, lots of also interesting things going on with gaming. So yeah, would be good to discuss these topics.
Yeah, like I think we should start with literally the big why. You know, like right now there are so much going on, like from sweeping tariffs and trade stuff, market volatility, economic implications, and like so on so forth. You said that there are many people on the streets. The inflation is going up already. There are like crazy plans from Trump's side, like as you mentioned, from producing iPhone in US to many more. Like, what is going on, Paula?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a very polarized politics here in the U.S. You know, between the Democrats and the Republicans, they definitely are trying to do things very differently. And then the new administration is to make some changes in the way that they do it. It's very chaotic here. But yeah, I think we were coming out of high inflation, and so a lot of people were kind of worried about the economic situation. And this week has been a lot of turmoil here with the stock market and everything. So yeah, it's just scary. I think a lot of investors and businesses are a little bit worried. So yeah, it's just a stressful time, I think, for any business owner, whether you own a big business or a small company.
It's really weird. Like there was nothing. I mean, like US was US and everything was the same. And like one day, hey, like crazy tariff here, like US against China, and everything will be changing, etc. Like, what do you think about what triggered this? The first shot, like, is it literally against China? Like there is something that we don't see in the bigger scale. What is behind?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is just politics. So the current administration, will follow. Looks like they're following through on their promises. Going into the campaign that they were going to, be tough on international trade in certain countries. Yeah, I think it's some of that. I think the other part of it is, in economics, there may be different ways to deal with inflation or different ways to deal with these things. And I guess they see tariffs and this strategy as a way to deal with some of the problems. And so yeah, I think I try not to get too into political bias, right? At least publicly. But yeah, I think that this is the way that they think that they might be able to turn around the U.S. economy a little bit and improve things. But I think in the short term, because it's just a shock, you have investors reacting. A lot of people thinking about whether they should sell all their stocks here in the U.S. So yeah, just really stressful time.
Yeah, like I think earlier we were chatting. China will be actually benefiting from that, although the tariff is like mainly on China. But is there really a winner? Can we say, okay, now US is losing, here is the data, and what do you think, like short run, long run, what is the picture out there?
Yeah, I don't think we can know yet. I mean, I think the U.S. has outsourced a lot of its manufacturing and jobs overseas. We had some pretty high unemployment recently, but now our unemployment's pretty okay. And then AI is giving people, and I guess coming out of COVID, there was a lot of funkiness in salaries that people were getting paid, and then once the revenues dipped post COVID, they had to lay off a bunch of people and kind of restructure a lot of companies did that, whether they did it silently or very loudly. So yeah, like right now a lot of people are unemployed, especially in the tech sector. And I think in gaming that's probably the biggest thing that everyone's probably talking about. And people are worried that there still will be more layoffs. And with the economy going into a difficult period, then that's very likely that companies will kind of try to be a little leaner to survive. I think in general that's kind of the story of game companies and studios is here in the West is try to be as lean as possible. I think that's where there was a discussion on LinkedIn this week that was interesting, that brought up kind of how can Western studios compete with Eastern studios. You have the 996, you have the difference in wages. You also have the fact that I think people thought for a while that folks out here in the West were just way more talented and just had a way better advantage in just the software and the hardware they had access to. I don't think that that's necessarily the case anymore. You can buy a really nice PC online anywhere in the world, get it all set up with cloud software. So yeah, I mean I guess the kind of advantages that the West had are kind of gone, and the East has a lot of advantages now. So yeah, I mean I think outsourcing is like at an all-time high in gaming, and publishers are shutting down studios in high-cost cities. So yeah, I think the other factor was the war in Ukraine and Russia also kind of messed up some of the way that studios had been working with low, pretty effective, like good cost labor in that area, and in Poland as well. It all doubled between 2018 and now. The cost of working in those areas has doubled. So yeah, I think Latin America is becoming interesting now with talent there and it being economically effective. But in the U.S., it's very difficult to operate with just how people get paid here and the expectations of 40-hour work week kind of thing, having really nice amenities. Yeah, that stuff is kind of disappearing.
And actually, considering it's affecting the tech industry pretty much, we already see it jump to gaming, right? Especially I know that the physical gaming goods like Nintendo, etc., already having problems right now. How do you connect it to gaming industry? Let's go abroad first without diving deep into mobile. But I think especially the layoff thing has been there for already more than a year. I think it's literally a snowball effect over there. How would it affect the layoff in the gaming industry, and what would be the next round for gaming space, considering if these things go in a negative way that I don't want to?
Investment has been difficult in the gaming space. The last year was very difficult for almost anybody trying to raise funds, whether it was Web3 or mobile, PC, pretty much in every single area there's a big problem, right? With mobile, it's UA. With PC, it's the fact that there just isn't as big of an audience on console as there used to be. See, folks are talking about how Unreal is essentially making most of the money in Unreal Fortnite editor. It's are creators really making enough money on Roblox? Can a studio really sustain just building Roblox games? I think there's only 2 or 3 major Roblox studios, and then everybody else is really just kids and kind of indies. So, and then I think within Steam, it's becoming very difficult to compete. So Steam is kind of turning into the App Store where kind of discovery and figuring out how to keep a game popular for more than a month is difficult. So when you look at all those things, investors are it's very easy for investors to say, hey, there's too many problems here. And then I think as large companies struggle to hit their numbers, then they're going to lay off folks as well, shut down studios. So I think, right now it doesn't look good from either side. If economic outlook looks really bad, then both of those sides are going to hold on to their money and businesses are going to cost cut. So I'd say most people are not optimistic especially after this week, about how things are going to be. Everybody I'm talking to is saying that you have to kind of brace on for another year. The studios are going to have to really work to survive through this year. At first it was like survive through last year and things will get better, and now it's like no, survive another year.
Yeah, I think also the cost thing is really there, right?
Yeah. I mean, the cost of UA, because there are companies that have a lot of dollars to spend, the cost of UA has gotten pushed up, and there's less competition within the ad network and exchange space. That was a whole nother story, I think, recently too, where people have been calling out Apple evidence in particular. Yeah, it's just become very, very hard.
Yeah, I think like even before all this happened, like we were seeing the App 11 thing, right? Like also there were problems in the mobile gaming ad tech space. We were chatting about the monopoly, how like there is almost no competition and there is no spot for new players. And so in the end, I think it will just looks like we'll double down the issues over there instead of like help. So like from the, you have a studio basically. How do you see from your own point, considering the studio and publisher side in the end?
Yeah. So I have some members of my team out here in Southern California, but we're kind of a bootstrapped kind of bunch. I think if you can raise funding, I think it's still kind of great to have a studio where everyone can work together. But that's becoming increasingly difficult, whether it's, where your developers have to be located in like a cost-effective location, or you have to kind of have a remote team that's a little bit spread out. That's kind of where things are going. So yeah, I think with the investment, especially early stage investment being difficult, I do think a lot of teams have to just like bootstrap, like working remote. And then, if they're able to potentially either raise a good amount of funds or become profitable, then they may be able to start to have like more of a on-site culture. But that's kind of a little sad for me, because when I kind of was working early in the industry, where I worked, when first launch was a small game company called Gerbo, and we ended up, building a bunch of games, and then we created Ad Colony out of that. It's hard to think that could have happened in like a remote setting with like just a few scattered people. Like, so yeah, it's a little sad that it's much harder to have that environment where the studios can just all work together in one place. I think that's going to become more rare. And as studios are shutting down in certain big cities, they're just going to opt for studios that are kind of remotely in other places. So I think that's one of the challenges of this like new world, and kind of having low cost development. Like, I guess if I'm understanding, like a good scenario is like, all small team that has figured out how to kind of bootstrap a game and learning how to get feedback, build an audience, work with influencers. That seems to be kind of where the promise is. Whereas I think the bad scenario is the teams that, just spend a whole bunch of money to pull together a lot of veteran talent and kind of put themselves into like a 3 to 4 year development cycle before they can even have a playable, shippable game. Like, I don't think anybody wants to take on that sort of process anymore. And I think only like established studios are going to be able to continue to do that. So yeah, I think the process is I think the scenarios are going to move to more of smaller teams, getting games out, trying to expose, early access, getting a community playing those games. But I think investors have to have patience in that, and also executives that are maybe used to more of like, planned marketing launch, product launches, and you throw all this money behind it, and then you get this immediate growth. It doesn't really happen that way with some of these games. You kind of have to grow them a little slower over a couple years as find the best KPIs and the best economy set up for these type of games. I think that the industry will just have to change and adapt to that scenario more.
Yeah, like I think there were so many Turkish startups as well. Like many of them even took investment from like almost, I would say, random investors, like some construction companies with a couple of millions. It was like, give me ideas. Gaming is booming. There are already so many companies like Peak, etc. I will give you $1 million. Just give me the project and that's it. Like right now, I feel like it's really going in the opposite direction. Even if the project sounds good, the team is cool. Like it still takes so long for investors to make the decision to like this is kind of safe to do that.
Investors before were just excited by if you gave them 3 positive signs that your team is solid, they will invest. And I think now it's back to where they have to check against a list of like 50 negative signs. And as long as you don't trip more than a few of those 50 negative signs, then maybe they'll invest in you.
And like, how do you think this, like what we chatted in the beginning, the current US, China tariff and whatnot stuff, do you feel it will, in the short run, let's say this year, for example, 25, just make it worse from investor angle, even including the like UA budgets, CPIs, etc.? Like how do you think it will shape up this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe the fastest effect is that just investors are going to be less willing to invest like cross-border. I think, like I've heard recently, that investors are already a little bit wary investing in the US right now in general from outside the US. So yeah, maybe that it'll be very difficult to find investors willing to invest either from China into the US. So that could be damaging in the short run. Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know how much the tariffs like are going to affect gaming directly, but some of the big game companies, I'm sure, will be affected, and that might trickle down. One of the things that I'm a little bit worried about is some of the regulation coming out of Europe as well, because they're actually regulating against a lot of like kind of mobile dark patterns in games. I mean, these exist in non-mobile games as well, but they are coming down, I think, harsher on things that are very common in mobile games. And already I'm already thinking like, wow, it's tough enough to deal with like Apple and everything, now to have to deal with dozens of countries in the EU like regulating against things like I was actually watching a little bit about it. But, pricing, for example, when you price an in-app purchase bundle, it's very typical to, price your bundles and what you're selling in like an offset so that the person has like extra money or they need to buy an extra bundle. It's like kind of just psychology, like economic psychology, like pricing stuff. This is all normal. You have your anchored price versus your, what you want them to spend and all that. And they're actually regulating against that stuff, calling it all dark patterns. And it's like, okay, how are you going to enforce this? It's a very gray area. Are you going to like literally make it illegal for like people to price their bundles in a certain way? So it's, to me, I'm like scratching my head now being like, really, are you going to tell me that now, games that have to change their economic model because of regulations in the EU? And yeah, some of these things borderline on gambling, right? A lot of it's like kind of gambling psychology. But unfortunately, like there is a lot of overlap between like mobile game design and gambling psychology. So it's a little bit worrisome to see how aggressive the EU is going to be on some of these things.
Yeah, exactly. And also like I was checking the data from China side on that front. Like only Tencent is like making more than $20 million every month just from US users, from in-app purchases, and overall in the like lifetime performance they made like more than a billion, and the other companies similar, like number 2, number 3, etc. So I think if it really, as you mentioned, goes beyond current level and like bounces to mobile gaming side, I think it will affect the whole edtech ecosystem as well. That's my concern, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, I mean, already, one of the problems with China is that they have full access to the U.S. market, but U.S. companies don't have any access to their market, right? Because I think in order to access their market, you have to be working with like a local Chinese company, and there's only a handful that I think you can really work with, which is like, NetEase and Tencent and stuff. So the reality is that U.S. companies really don't have access to those users. Like it's through a very complex process that it looks like even Scopely and large companies have a tough time getting it figured out. So yeah, like it's very lopsided there.
Is it the sign of WW3?
No, I mean I think it's a sign of like very good strategic strategy by them to protect their industry and I guess their players, right? They have very strict laws in the country on interactive entertainment. So part of it is political, but yeah, I guess for them they've figured out a way to insulate the US from affecting their audience with games and such. And whereas they have the ability to make games and they have the understanding of how to make like 4X games and RPG games and certain types of games, they have a real understanding of how to make those games very profitable and very addictive. I think even in the US, like not very many companies have figured that out either.
And like to wrap things up, like what do you think about the worst and best scenario? Like what is the big picture out here for, wrapping up our chat?
Yeah, I mean, I think before some of this economic stuff, I was actually optimistic about 2025. Like I thought that investors would potentially start investing again. The industry would have maybe a little bit of a beginning of a renaissance where, indie developers and folks that were fired from these companies would start their own companies. And, platforms like Roblox and UEFN and obviously game engines like Godot, Unity, Unreal, they're all so accessible today that people should be able to figure out how to, make some games without needing millions of dollars. So I'm still optimistic that there will be like a bunch of creative folks that you just cannot prevent them from making something, and they'll put in the time and they'll make some cool stuff. But yeah, the reality is that if they have zero support, if they have no ability to market their games, if they have like awful economic kind of environment that they're building their games in, then it is going to make it extremely hard. So hopefully this year all of this stuff kind of turns around quickly, and I can be optimistic again.
Yeah, please, let's be optimistic, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So, final words, what do you say to the industry folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some cool innovation going on in some different areas like cross-platform games and creators and obviously in AI. So I think if once we get through the tough period, I think we'll be able to do some innovative stuff. But yeah, hopefully this doesn't last very long and people stay positive. The large companies are going to struggle, but I can only hope that startups and small companies can find some success. Gaming has gotten so big that, I mean, you even heard the story this last week of a single developer putting out a game on Steam. I think if you calculate out, he's made like over $30 million or something, right? Obviously, that's a fluke. It's a single guy, made a lot of money. But just imagine how, if a single guy can make that much money, imagine how many 10-person teams can potentially put out a game that makes a couple $1 million a month, right? And that makes that team really sustainable and allows them to build a business, right? And so I hope that can happen more, but it is challenging out there, especially without like publishing and investment support. So hopefully that improves.
There are challenges as well as opportunities. So fingers crossed, guys. Thanks for the cool chat, Paolo.
For sure, man.